Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week, our special guest is Abilene ISD Superintendent of Schools, Dr. John Kuhn. Dr. Kuhn, we see each other around town from HEB to the mall. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, school's officially over, so you guys probably just go into a mode where you're probably preparing for the upcoming school year and what have you, and analyzing what happened in the previous school year. But this afternoon, today's show, we really kind of want to hit on school choice and school vouchers. It was essentially passed in the House, in the Senate, here in the state of Texas, and Governor Abbott has kind of turned this thing into law now. And I know you have a very big megaphone about this. If you have not checked out your Facebook page, I mean, my goodness, which is a good thing. You have your own concerns about this whole thing, but first and foremost, and tell us, give me your. We kind of have an idea about what you're going to say about this, but I guess your thoughts as Governor Abbott signed this into the law.
Yeah, so I think like most public school advocates and supporters, I have a lot of concerns about the impact that any voucher bill is going to have. I think it's a colossal mistake, and that's not a surprise to anybody. I think it's really, really unfair to fund kids who go to private schools at $10,000 each out of the state treasury, while you're funding kids in public schools in Texas $6,000 out of the state treasury. I think it doesn't pass the smell test for me. It doesn't make sense to create a competing system of schools. The public school system was established to ensure that every kid in the state of Texas, no matter where they live, has access to free, appropriate public education. And that is the system that has traditionally educated 90+% of the kids in Texas. And so it feels to me like the state is taking its eye off the ball, and rather than serving the majority of kids, now they've decided to spend $1 billion covering the tuition costs that traditionally parents have covered when they chose private schools. And I think it's important to note that in other states that have tried this, Arizona, for example, 80% of the students in Arizona that are receiving these vouchers were already private school students. They were students that were not attending public schools. And so the notion that these vouchers are going to be used to help public school kids escape failing schools, that's really not what pans out. I think it's Iowa where only 13% of the voucher recipients ever attended a private school. So what it ends up being is a new entitlement. It's like reverse Robin Hood, where you're taking money away from the middle class to help offset expenses that traditionally wealthy parents have covered for themselves.
How do you all envision this kind of playing out as we really kind of turn the page into the next chapter of school vouchers in Texas?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted and interesting challenge. Nobody else is coming to save Abilene other than Abilenians, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's incumbent upon me and my staff to ensure that we provide an absolutely incredible education for our students. That pressure has always been there. That's not new with this bill. We've had competition my whole career with charter schools, homeschooling, online schools, the surrounding public schools. We're all competing for students. That's the lifeblood of any school, right? So I do think one change that public schools have been slow to adopt is marketing. I think for a lot of us in schools, we had the mentality that we have to make sure that our students are being successful so that when they take the STAR test, we're getting a good accountability rating. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us traditionally have thought that's really our marker of success, that we can show parents, hey, we're a high quality school. But what I've seen, especially with large charter school chains, they have huge marketing budgets that public schools have traditionally not had. With this new bill coming, I think it's really going to be important that public schools start to really more aggressively market themselves and really kind of aggressively compete for public eyeballs and for positive public perception.
Tell me, for someone, the layperson who just sees that dollar amount, they probably like, oh, well, maybe I guess that's a lot of money, but $10,000, what does that actually mean per student when you put it in that context?
The way that they set up the bill was to tie private school vouchers to 85% of the total funding that the average public school student in Texas gets. It's a little misleading, though, because the state is only on the hook for $6,000 of what public school students get. The rest comes from programs like the Free and Reduced Lunch Program, which is a federal program, Title I funds, which is a federal program. And so the state is basically fronting these private schools money that we get from the federal government, not from the state, right? And well, there's a bill coming through the federal government right now that would add even more voucher dollars to students in the states that are in voucher programs. So ultimately, if and when that passes, which is pretty likely to pass at the federal level, voucher students will be getting more in state and federal voucher money than public schools get in state and federal money.
Before we get into the STAR test, because that's a whole nother thing to really discuss and talk about, let's kind of unpack one more element of school vouchers and school choice and all this. You know, we always hear the stories of how it's going to impact, you know, the inner city school districts like Dallas ISD, Houston ISD, San Antonio ISD, and it's really going to take away from them. Do you envision that becoming a reality here in Abilene? Certainly, how it will impact AISD, Wiley ISD, and so forth.
I think the enrollment effect will be present, but will be pretty minimal, because, like I said earlier, there are already a plethora of choices, and so parents who are dissatisfied with their public school already have had the opportunity to transfer to another public school or to withdraw and attend a charter school or to do homeschooling. So I think this is it's just another choice in an already choice-rich environment. So I don't expect a devastating impact to enrollment. But I'm also not going to say we won't have any students that opt for a voucher. There are some unknowns. Private schools don't have to accept the vouchers. And private schools also deal with capacity. There's a teacher shortage. There's just a certain amount of space. I think one of the things really long-term, more of a statewide question is how many new private schools are going to crop up. The bill has a policy in it, which actually Stan Lambert was key in making sure was in there. And this is a good, thing. And that is that to participate in the voucher system, a private school has to have been in existence for at least 2 years. And the purpose of that part of the bill was to prevent like fly-by-night operators from just propping up a private school because they see an opportunity to make money.
Yeah.
So, we do have private schools in Abilene, Texas, and some really, really good schools that do a really, really good job. So will there be folks who opt to go to those schools? And, the answer is probably some. But at the same time, are there people who really, really love Wiley ISD and Abilene ISD and Jim Ned ISD? There certainly are. And we will continue to do the, very best job that we can to educate our kids, also to have, really high quality extracurricular programs and the things that parents are demanding. Those are things that I've been working on for a year in Abilene ISD with my team, giving parents choice internally within our school district. And we've come up with the circles model at our elementary schools, where instead of saying, hey, you live in this attendance zone, you have to go to this elementary school, now we're saying you have your choice of these 3 elementary schools. We're piloting that this year in just 3 schools, and then next year we're going to roll that out district-wide, where all of our elementary parents have multiple options for schooling, right? And then we're going to start talking about that. Is that something we want to do at the middle school level as well?
School choice and school choice.
School choice internally within our district, because there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's a very good thing for people to have choices. When we give a student one assignment, they may grumble about it. When we give a student 4 or 5 different assignments and you pick the one you want to do, they tend to have a better response to that, right? So I don't disagree with the notion of parents having choices. I do completely disagree with the rhetoric that they didn't already have a lot of choices. They have had, but I think for us in Abilene, we definitely have looked at our own system and kind of broken through some of those really old barriers of how how things have always been done in public schools,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Let me ask you about the STAR test, because this is another thing that came about in this legislative session. Essentially the end of it. But is it really? I mean, are we going to see another element, another standardized test replace it? What are you seeing? And I guess your thoughts on that whole standardized test
Yeah,
itself.
so this was a really interesting part of the legislative session that I watched very closely. It was definitely something that both state senators and state representatives talked about a lot, and that was we are getting rid of the STAR test. And they said it loud and proud. And then what ended up happening was the bill died. It died on the last day of the legislative session because the House and Senate could not agree on a final version of the bill. Most of us in public schools really preferred the House version because the House version really did get rid of STAR. The House version said STAR goes away and schools will still have to administer tests to their students, but they can use a national norm reference test. That's great because some of those national norm reference tests we already use in public schools as kind of a diagnostic tool to see how are our students progressing through the year so that we know they're going to be ready when it's time to take the STAR, right? One of those examples would be the MAP test. The other good thing about using a national norm reference test is the Texas Education Agency can't get its fingers in it and adjust the scoring metrics, and so it's like it's an objective measure. There's no subjectivity to it. And then thirdly, you can compare how Texas students are doing versus students in several other states. With the STAR test, you can't do that. And so what I've noticed over the course of my 27-year career in education is when the governor's up for reelection and they need a Texas miracle, all of a sudden the STAR scores get a whole lot better all over the state. But when they want to pass vouchers, the STAR scores kind of take a nosedive. And if you understand how the scoring system is altered year upon year, they change the difficulty of the questions. They change how many questions a student has to answer to get a passing grade. They change how many students have to get a passing grade for the school district to be an A or a B or a C. They constantly tweak all of these metrics, and it has resulted in a system that really nobody has very much confidence in. And in fact, there were representatives who said nobody trusts the STAR test. Well, the reason nobody trusts the STAR test is because it pretends to be a school accountability system, but it's really a political narrative machine. When we need schools to look good because somebody's running for office and wants to say we had a Texas miracle, then they make schools look good. And when they need them to look bad so they can get vouchers passed, then schools look bad. And that has happened over and over and over again. It's not a trustworthy system because these aren't trustworthy people. These are politicians who are trying to get reelected. And so when you let the politicians control the school accountability system, it's has all the validity of the Soviet crop reports, that you hear about from the old days, right? It's a completely morally and ethically compromised system that misinforms Texans rather than informs them. In fact,
Right.
There was a headline recently about the STAR reading tests, and the headline was all about how every year, secretly behind the scenes, they make the test more difficult. And so you can't compare this year's passing rate to last year's passing rate because even if it goes down, your kids may have done better. It just doesn't show up because they manipulate the difficulty of the test.
If Dr. John Kuhn could design a standardized test, what would that look like? I mean, in how would that benefit a student, a child, throughout their lifetime? I mean, because obviously we hear, oh, well, the school district's public education is just not what it used to be, and this and that and the other. But from someone like you, how would you design something that can really benefit someone?
Yeah, I think the first thing is it's not the test so much. We give lots and lots of tests in public schools. We give tests that our teachers make in the classroom. Our students take the SAT test, they take the ACT, they take the TSI, they take STAR, they take MAP, they take lots and lots of tests. So the test is not really the problem. It's the question is, what do you do with the results? As soon as you take student test results and you weaponize those and you turn them into a battering ram to beat up teachers and beat up schools, well, now there's a motivation to have those tests be not great, right? And so the first thing I would do is have a system where we administer tests to kids. It's not a single day high pressure test where however your child does on this test is going to determine whether their school closes, whether their teacher gets fired. That is way too much to put on a child who really you just want them to show you what they've learned or not learned. And so the first thing I would do is make it diagnostic. We would get data from whatever the standardized test you want to use is. The schools would get data that we can use to look and say, are our teachers getting the job done in fifth grade math, in third grade reading, in English 1 in high school? All of that's okay. When we get our STAR results back, I dig into them. I've maintained a spreadsheet going back to 2012, which is the first year STAR was given. I did it for my last school district. I'm doing it for Abilene ISD, where I track trends. Did we improve year upon year? And then how did we do in comparison to the state? Are we lagging behind the state? Are we doing better than the state? Are we catching up to the state? All of that is very useful information to me. Where I get really, really oppositional to this system is where it becomes a political tool, and they take Highland Park ISD north of Dallas and say, hey, Presidio ISD, why are you lagging behind this community? There are social realities and there are school funding realities that have a direct impact on student learning. And the system just pretends that that's not true. And when we school people acknowledge that, when we acknowledge that a school with an 80% free and reduced lunch rate is probably not going to have students perform at the same level as a school with a 0% free and reduced lunch rate, the public school opponents immediately say, oh, you're just making excuses, right? But you're not. You're stating a fact, a mathematical fact, and a social reality. So unfortunately, I've worked most of my career in schools that served over half of the population of students in the schools I've served have been low income, right? And that comparison, that apples to oranges comparison that the state loves to do, it's something I've contended with. And it's really not fair to communities. The thing that people don't realize is that the value of your property, a lot of it is determined by that A through F rating they place on your schools. But the A through F rating they place on your schools, despite what the state will tell you, it is not determined exclusively by the quality of teaching that happens in the classroom. There's a whole host of social factors that are baked into the recipe that determine that A through F rating. And so if you're in a low-income school, you're way, 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 way more likely to have a C or a D rating than if you're in a high-income school. In fact, I saw a statistic, the D-rated schools in the A through F system in the state of Texas, there were only like 5 or 6 that were not over 50% low free and reduced lunch. So
wow.
The opponents of public schools will say demographics aren't destiny, and I agree with that. There are poor kids who go to Yale, right? But when you have hundreds and hundreds of kids from home lives where both parents are working and they're struggling to make ends meet, they come to school with a different skill set from the very beginning, right?
Sure.
And so we play catch up from the very beginning. And I understand the moral obligation that we have to take these kids and put them on a level playing field with everybody else. By the time they graduate, we want them to go to college. We want them to have great jobs. We want to break chains of poverty. We want to do all those things. But the accountability system doesn't promote that. It makes it harder for us to do that. It makes it harder for us to hire teachers. It makes it harder for communities to attract families that are on the wealthier end of things. And so the accountability system, in my view, advances a kind of a segregation of society based on income and class. And those realities, they already exist because wealthier people are going to move to where houses are nicer and house price,
Mhm.
and where house builders going to build nicer houses. Well, where people want to move, and the school rating system just exacerbates those inequalities that already exist socially. So that's one of the reasons I do what I do, because I feel like it matters a lot. If I can take a school district with 60, 70, 80% of our kids on free and reduced lunch, and I can scratch and claw and fight and move a school district from a D to a C to a B, and change the public perception of that school district, then I can help a whole community rise, right? And that's what I felt like I was a part of in my last school district, and that's what I feel like right now I'm a part of in Abilene ISD.
So whenever you took this job and you were coming from Mineral Wells ISD, when you took this position, and you well, first of all, when you interviewed for the position, you took the position. Did you see this as like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a mountain of a challenge? Um, God bless me, please. What was going through your mind at that point, knowing that there's having to encounter some of these things and going through the challenge of public education?
So for me, the challenge was very similar to the school district I was in previously for 8 years. When I started there, our A through F rating was it was either 70 or 72. It was a low 70.
Mm.
And when I left, we were an 87. 80% free and reduced lunch, very large numbers of at-risk kids. And I got to be a part of a team that, number one, we understood the accountability system. We understood different levers that we could pull to help bring that grade up, but also understood the importance of being really, really visible in the community and being the head cheerleader for my school district and my town. Because everybody wants their town to rise. I have a lot of pride of place wherever I'm at, right? Like if I'm in Mineral Wells, I'm all in. I'm a Ram. When I'm in Abilene, I'm all in. I'm a Cooper Cougar and I'm an Abilene High Eagle, and I'm an Adams Phoenix, 100%. And so I'm going to fight for the reputation of my district. I'm going to fight for the reputation of my teachers, my kids. When we have a team go to nationals in robotics, I'm going to get on Facebook and I'm going to tell everybody about it, right? And it's not that I'm, look down on the school districts around us. We've got great school districts around us. I've been really good friends with Joey Light and Glenn Teal, and I wish those guys the best. But I'm in Abilene, and I'm for Abilene, and I'm from Abilene, right? I'm not from Abilene, but I am now, And so, well, what's good for the city is good for the school. What's good for the school is good for the city. What I do, I'm an educator, but really it's more than that, right? And I think a lot of my teachers and a lot of my leaders feel the same way. We aren't just building up kids. We're building up a city. We're building up society. We're building up the state and the world, by giving these kids a fighting chance. And the accountability system is just one quality marker that matters. That's why I talked earlier about marketing, right? Like, I think public schools have put all of our eggs in the accountability system basket as the way we prove that we're good. But if you look at like universities, look at ACU, they market themselves by logos everywhere. And you look around, there's purple all over the place, right? And that colleges are really, really good at that. Public schools, they're pretty good at it at their stadiums, and stuff like that. And maybe when you get in the halls, you'll see, some school spirit stuff. But I think we've been a little too passive in really being forward with, we are a great school, and here are all the reasons why. And I think part of the reason for that is we're very busy just trying to teach kids and trying to feed kids and trying to transport kids and trying to, make sure that the hallways are safe and, safety and security. I mean, there's so much to be done just to have school that we've taken our eye off the ball when it comes to marketing ourselves as public schools. And the big charter school chains, they haven't made that mistake. There are charter school chains that they have worse academic scores than the public schools around them, but they still draw quite a few kids from the public schools because they market themselves extremely well.
You see billboards, you see TV commercials, you see everything online, everything.
Yeah.
So.
And I think public schools have, and part of that is we spend taxpayer dollars, and there are a lot of rules around that, right? And so I remember one time I was approached in my last school district about putting an ad in a publication. It was a newspaper where they had all the senior pictures in it. And they were like, hey, do you want to buy an ad? And I said, let me make sure that's legal. And I called my legal counsel, and they were like, yeah, you can't spend education funds unless there's an educational purpose. And what's the educational purpose to putting an ad in that paper? And so ultimately, if I worded the ad in such a way that it would benefit the district by recruiting kids or something like that, I was allowed to do it. But just buying an ad to say, hey, we're proud of our seniors, I couldn't do that because it violated a law in terms of how we can spend our money. So I don't know, that's one of my frustrations, I think, with the voucher system in general, is that public schools have a lot of handcuffs. So this is a fist fight, right? And it's a fist fight where we've got our hands cuffed together, and there's certain things that private schools are going to be able to do that we can't do. Yeah. So, the way they spend their money, there's just so many things that are different.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Kuhn, I appreciate your time today. It's interesting to get the school district's perspective on things, and eventually we want to have someone, a state representative who was in favor of this vouchers from the very get-go, and to hear their perspective. But it's nice to hear certainly how it impacted Abilene ISD. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah, glad to be here. One last thought, if I can squeeze it in. Yeah. The real big concern with vouchers, and I hope you'll ask the representative this question, is how much will it cost long term? Because the costs have exploded in the other states that have done universal vouchers. Currently, the bill they just passed is $1 billion cap over the next 2 years. The question is, are they going to remove that cap? And when they do, there are states where it's now 10 times what they initially budgeted for it. And there's one state governor, Arizona, I think, who said, we're going to have to stop certain programs in our state just to pay for the voucher system. So I think that's what I would challenge people to watch over the next 5-10 years. What does this do to the state budget? Because I think they made a colossal mistake.
Wow. Dr. Kuhn, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
For Dr. John Kuhn, Superintendent of Schools, or AISD, I'm Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.